Welcome, everyone, to Arbiter Sports Talk. I'm your host, Ty Hawkins, alongside John Garrettson, and thanks for letting us be a part of your day. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Boise State hoops, some NCAA tournament, and some news and notes around the NFL and the NBA. John, how are you doing today?
I'm great as always. Thanks, Ty.
Good. Glad to have you here. And while we're here, we're going to give John a little pub real quick. He is the PRSSA president here at Boise State University. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on to Stampede this next week.
Yeah, no, thanks for the mention. So March 14th, we're going to have a PRSSA night with the Stampede. $10 tickets, $5 goes back to us. Not a bad gig. Visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/PRSSA.BSU for more information.
All right, sounds like you've done that before. You guys go out there, enjoy a Stampede game, and support Boise State PRSSA. Stampede are somewhat exciting to go to. You get to see the guys who just didn't quite make it in the NBA.
Saying it kindly.
Yeah, exactly. They got a career in Cambodia waiting for them at a professional level. But back to business, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with Boise State men's basketball. They got housed last night on the road at Fresno, 76-56. Gave up 26 points to Marvell Harris, who had 20 in the first half. What did you get from the game last night?
Housed is an understatement, Ty, and it is no joke. This was a winnable game for Boise State, and it should have been a win for them. They
Almost a must-win.
Almost a must-win. I mean, they had 4 games left, 3 out of 4 they needed to win, so now it's 3 out of 3. They just looked off, and especially Anthony Drimmick and Derek Marks, they just were nobodies. I mean, they were benched to start the second half, and that's almost unheard of.
And we talked a little bit about the game before the show. I put it on DVR so I could fast forward the commercials, and you said you could have fast forwarded the whole game because Fresno was lights out at home. Boise State couldn't get anything going. I don't know what they shot exactly. Broplay had 14 points. Mikey Thompson had a really nice game with 21 points, but with the exception of those two, the Broncos could have saved the frequent flyer miles and stayed here.
Yeah, when you shoot 38% from the field, 25% in the first, it's just not a good sign to win a game. So it's really disappointing, especially riding high off the momentum against that UNLV game. So.
And before we get to that UNLV game, this was essentially, the Broncos aren't a bubble team this year. Mountain West isn't as strong as it was last year. So they've got 2 guaranteed teams, I think, in New Mexico and San Diego State, who are both tough programs. Boise State needed this win. Fresno State's working their way up. There was a tie for 4th with UNLV. Did the Broncos blow it last night?
Well, it seems more and more like the Broncos are just going to be an NIT team, which isn't bad. It's still a great, respected tournament, but it just seems very unlikely for the Broncos to make it into the March Madness tourney.
And while we did mention a little bit about the UNLV game, big win at Taco Bell Arena. I don't know, did we hit the 3,000 mark? Did they ring the bell or whatever they wanted to do?
I don't know. That wasn't announced, I don't think. I saw a lot of publicity, which was great for Project 3K, which we're all about here, but I don't know, actually. Good question.
We're going to have to do a little research on that one.
Yeah, a little research.
But game winner by Derek Marks that game. Coach Rice was a little excited about that. They had to go to the teleprompter to see if the game winner had gotten off in time.
Right.
His sportsmanship was in question after this. And for those of you who don't know at home, Coach Rice, after the Marks game winner, ran to the prompter, looked, got ecstatic. Coach Dave Rice at UNLV is right there. He's kind of like, well, that's not very classy. What did you think how our Coach Rice, Leon, responded?
Yeah, I don't think you can blame Coach Rice. The reaction there was just so raw and so emotional that you almost can applaud for what he did. Yes, his sportsmanship from an outside perspective could be questioned, but if I'm Rice, I'm doing the same exact thing. You win a game on a reviewed ref call, so much anticipation is built up that you almost, it's like a natural reaction. I don't think he thought about it. He just did it. So.
With that, though, as we both watched the game on CBS Sports last night, and thank you, CBS Sports, for they aired a lot of Boise State games. I've enjoyed it.
That's been great.
Mountain West action on that channel this year. They mentioned, the announcers, that Coach Rice had indeed sent a text message to Dave Rice apologizing for his actions, which I think is very sportsmanlike and probably very necessary.
Yep. No, I totally agree. Again, outside perspective, I guess there could be some question about how he reacted, but Taco Bell Arena fed off that. And that was just really real and really cool to see. And so I have no problem with it. It's a shame that UNLV students and fans, of course, are always going to have a problem with that. But just that third party is just even questioning Coach Rice's actions. I think people would do the same thing, too, in his shoes.
I think you're right. And while we're talking about NCAA basketball, let's go ahead and move into one of the hotter topics, I think, going on as March Madness becomes more relevant. Wichita State, first team that is 30-0. There's a lot of speculation. Do they deserve a 1 seed this year in the NCAA tournament, field of 65? What do you think, yes or no?
I mean, we're Boise State Broncos here, so we all know what it's like being the mid-major and having to win out to at least get some recognition. But in this case, it's for a #1 seed in the March Madness tournament. I absolutely believe Wichita State should be a #1. And even the Kansas head coach, Bill Self, even said so. They deserve, the Shockers need to be #1.
Yeah.
And going 30-0, I think the last team to do it was the 90-91 UNLV team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and so it's a huge feat, no matter who they're playing. They could be playing, I mean, not nobodies, but they play in a mid-major conference. They've dominated their opponents. Why not? What, if not now, when?
Exactly, and I agree. I'm all on board with you 100% here. Here's why I think they're undefeated. The Missouri Valley, a lot like the Mountain West, is down this year. They lost Creighton to the American Conference. That's understandable. But they've got wins over St. Louis, which is ranked one of the top teams in the Atlantic 10. They've beaten Alabama and Tennessee in the SEC. Yes, they are Alabama and SEC, but the SEC is down as well this year. But those are two BCS wins, if you will. And they've got guys who can play. This is a team that went to the Final Four last year. They've got Cleanthony Early, Fred VanVleet, Ron Baker, and Nick Wiggins, who ironically is the older brother of Kansas star Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah.
This is a team that is built for the tournament. And in basketball, I think it's a lot different versus football. Football, there's weights involved, size. They're a 3-star recruit, 4-star recruit. Some of these guys slip through the cracks. Cleanthony Early played at junior college, played at one of the top prep schools in America. Now he's at a high level playing right here for the NCAA tournament. These guys can play, and I think the Shockers deserve a #1 seed.
Absolutely, and that's what makes college basketball so special. It's exactly what you just said. Anyone can win any given game, and that's awesome. And if we were to even use last year's bracket, a Final Four team, by that math, they should then be a #1 seed. I mean, of course, there's so much going into it, but that's a team that didn't really lose all too much.
No, they didn't. And the thing with them last year is they took national champion Louisville, who's now #7 in the RPI 25. They took them to the wire in their Final Four game. So we very easily could be looking at a team that might have won or lost a national championship. Sure. We've seen Butler go back-to-back times, close games. I think these guys deserve a shot, and I think we're on the same page with that. Going to stick with some NCAA basketball here. Kansas won their 10th straight regular season outright title. Talked a little bit about conference tournaments, and when you got the rundown, you kind of thought, you're like, this is a guy.
I saw it on the rundown. I was like, what's going on
here?
It's
like, we want to kind of address why conference tournaments are important.
Yes.
There could be teams that are on the bubble, teams vying for a #1 seed, money as well. Why do you think the conference tournament is important as opposed to not just outright?
Well, that's the point we just talked about earlier. These games, especially come tournament time, the stakes are so much higher and the teams are playing with so much more energy and so much more worth to it that you need to have these tournaments no matter, let's say Kansas wins 10 in a row, 10 Big 12 tournaments in a row. That 11th is still not a guarantee.
Yeah.
And so that's what the beauty is with these tournaments is that you don't know.
Yeah.
You just don't know. They could be regular season heroes, but come postseason, who knows?
And we saw a couple years ago with Kemba Walker and the University of Connecticut where they came in as, I think, a 3 or a 4 seed in a tough Big East tournament.
Right.
And won the whole thing and rode that thing all the way to a national championship. So I think it can be a momentum builder, can get you some wins that you might need to otherwise separate from the NIT. Boise State, perfect example. If Boise State can win this conference tournament, might be a long shot in the dark, but it's a guaranteed seed. And then that forces the committee to decide, are we taking a second and third team? And for the Mountain West, I think they would. If Boise State won, then you take you take New Mexico and San Diego State.
And that's what's so awesome is that if a team like a Boise State were to disrupt, or any other conference team that is a mid-tier team in their conference were to disrupt and win the championship, your whole thinking about the entire conference changes. And especially from the selector's point of view, what do you do now? When you had that pre-mindset, oh, we're going to take 2 teams, or oh, we're going to take 3 teams, what do you do now?
Exactly, and we're going to stick on that topic a little bit. The Big 12, I think next to the Big 10, is arguably the best conference in America. Down year for the ACC. North Carolina's coming on. Duke's always going to be Duke. But with the exception of Kansas, let's say Kansas doesn't win this Big 12 tournament. Do you think the Big 12 still deserves a #1 seed? Are there any teams in there that you could see as a #1, or are we looking at 2 to 5 type seeds?
We talked a little bit about Iowa State being one of those reputable teams coming out of the Big 12. I still think teams like Texas can still make some moves. Baylor, if they stop, their second half play is a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
To say the least. But yeah, no, I really do believe a team from the Big 12 should take home a #1 seed.
I think a team that is being slept on in the Big 12 is Oklahoma. Lon Kruger's done a phenomenal job. He's taken 2 different programs. He built Florida to what it is. He helped UNLV get back to prominence. Now he's taking Oklahoma, a traditionally football-known school, to big things. And they gave Kansas all they could handle this last week at the field house.
Yeah. The only team I'll say that shouldn't be in any recognition is TCU, man.
My goodness.
I know it's a little bit of a change in topic, but ever since they entered the Big 12, man, they've just done zilch.
You can say that in football, too.
Exactly.
The thing, here's why I have a small spot in my heart for TCU. Trent Johnson played basketball here at Boise State when we were relevant in the Big Sky. Was part of the Tommy Connors era, Chris Childs era. We were going to the NCAA tournament, so I'd like to see him succeed.
Sure.
Helped get Stanford going, helped build Reno and what they are, but for him to leave Louisiana State University, not necessarily known in a basketball school and SEC football hungry, for TCU, TCU stinks. I'm sorry.
And that's saying it lightly.
Yeah, all right. We're moving over to the ACC a little bit. Surprisingly, Virginia is leading the ACC, which is supposed to be the SEC of college basketball, if you will, comparing it to football.
Hello, Malcolm Brogdon, sophomore stud.
Who said that again?
Malcolm Brogdon, sophomore, Cavaliers, baby. I love that Virginia is making a name for itself in the ACC because we know the ACC in basketball as Duke and UNC. Sure, Syracuse and Pitt are now involved, but traditionally it's just been those two teams from North Carolina. We got Virginia saying, hello, we're here to play. And they're riding a 12-game winning streak, and I think they're going to take it very, very hard into the ACC play.
And they set a record last night, 17 home games in a row for Virginia. That's good for their program. But they've got a really big test coming up this Saturday at Syracuse. Syracuse has kind of been hot and cold since that loss at Duke, bounced back against Maryland. Do you think this could be an upset from what we see?
I believe the Cavaliers are going to have this one in the bag. And the only reason why I'm saying that, Syracuse lost, and they almost lost to Maryland too.
They did, but
it was shaky.
But they're going to be back at the Carrier Dome. I don't think Virginia gets out of Carrier Dome with a win. This is what makes this interesting.
Yeah,
you don't agree.
We don't know, and that's the beauty of it.
But I know where to find you on Twitter, on Facebook, and I have your cell phone. Text message.
Same goes for you, my friend. Same goes for
good.
you.
Well, enough basketball for now. We're going to move on to a little bit of NFL, and it's been a busy week. We don't have to talk about Michael Sams anymore. We don't have to read that kind of stuff because it's already been established. We're going to talk a little bit about the 49ers head coach, Jim Harbaugh, and was this trade really going to happen between the Cleveland Browns? The Cleveland Browns.
Right.
They're not Detroit. I love that video. But, I mean, how do you feel about how do you feel?
Right. I don't think it was ever going to happen. I think there was a lot of smoke in the air, and that's fine. I mean, a lot of NFL rumors happen around this combine time, and this was something to make headlines because the Cleveland Browns, I think, took a year and a half almost to find a head coach. It felt like it, at least. There was never a chance Jim Harbaugh was going to go to the Browns. Could a trade happen down the road? Who knows? Maybe. I would love to see a coach being traded because that's a curveball right there.
Well, we did see my Oakland Raiders trade John Gruden to the Buccaneers, who won a Super Bowl against us that same year. I thought this trade could have gone down. I thought it was smoke and mirrors at first too, but the more I've read, the more I've seen on NFL Network, things like that, I think it might have really happened. And there's some disagreements going on between the brass and the management brass and Coach Harbaugh. My thing with that is, and I'll allude a little bit to Jerry Jones and why he thinks Tony Romo hasn't won a ring yet, is I think the management needs to manage and the coach needs to coach. That leave the egos at the door. You do your job. I'll do my job. We both know there's one common goal at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was on Pro Football Talk. They were talking about how a trade could go down with Harbaugh because of what you just said, the differences between him and management. The Dolphins, potential trade suitor. And so Joe Philbin, sleep easy, my friend.
And I think Jim Harbaugh is the type of guy. I mean, this is a Niners team that was dominant in the mid-'90s. And then they saw, I think it was 8 or 9 years, no playoffs, anything. You bring in Harbaugh. He's been to 3 NFC championships in 3 years. Now, do I think their windows may be closing right now? Sure. But we're talking about a guy who's instant production. You put him in a town like Cleveland, or city, if you will. Yeah. It's Cleveland, but the fan base is there's a strong following. I think he could make them relevant, although it's a tough AFC division. I think Harbaugh is a good fit for them, but I also think he fits in well with the Niners.
I was just going to comment on that. Chalk it up to Browns fans still sticking around because they still have a pretty big cult following.
Yeah. Well,
no matter how many seasons they'll lose.
Yeah. I mean, you have to get used to that, too, as a Nets fan, so you'll be seeing it here pretty soon.
All right.
The thing with sports is it's fun to root for a loser because – let's be honest, the Seahawks, they just won the Super Bowl. We live in the Mountain Northwest, Pacific Northwest right next door. how many Seahawk fans were really,
Great point.
I mean, and now everyone just loves the Seahawks. We live in a predominantly Bronco area, California teams.
Sure.
When people's teams start winning, I mean, the Pirates all of a sudden have a following again. It's just one of those things.
I can't even remember the last time the Pirates had a winning season. Aside from
last 2 years, right?
Last 2 years.
But I agree with you. It's good to see that the Cleveland fan base, and it took them a year and a half to get it. No one wanted that job. I mean, no one. I hope they can get it together, and that's good that their following is still there. This is going to touch a little bit on the political side of things in sports. Arizona, which was vetoed today, was going to pass a law that they would reserve the right to not sell items to gays or homosexuals. What's going on there? What do you think? They've already lost one Super Bowl because of it. That's just unacceptable, in my opinion.
I mean, we're in the year 2014, and things like this just keep happening. And you got to just scratch your head at the state of Arizona. What's going on? You're losing potentially millions, if not billions, of revenue because the Super Bowl is just that enormous on something as just silly as this. To say it plain and simple, I don't get it. And they have had as you said, they've had a previous track record where it's just like, come on, guys.
This is a state that just recognized Martin Luther King Day as a national holiday in 1993. Former NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue said, we're taking the Super Bowl away from you guys until you pass it. They did eventually in 1993, but think of all the revenue, as you mentioned, fan following. People aren't going to want to go to Arizona and things like that. I mean, we're talking about a state, their governor says, if you look like you're of Hispanic descent, you need to have your ID on you. I understand there's illegal immigrants, but I mean, how do you feel? If I'm going to buy a Super Bowl shirt from you and you have to ask me if I'm homosexual, I'm like, who the hell are you?
Exactly.
What business is it of what I do in the bedroom? That just appalls me, and I'm glad that they did veto it, and you don't have to deal with that any further.
So.
And another hot topic, which kind of borders on the political side of things in sports right now, is the N-word used in professional sports locker rooms. It trickles, I'd say, all the way down to junior high locker rooms. NFL's talking about giving some penalties for that. What do you think?
It's a touchy subject, of course. I mean, how hard and how much can they regulate this, or how are they going to regulate this? I think this infringes a little bit on personal freedoms and freedom of speech. Yes, it's offensive. Yes, I understand it has its history, but I don't know. I don't really know how I feel.
Well, I'm a biracial African American, and here's my take on it is, Marshawn Lynch is from Oakland, California. Chad Johnson is from Miami, Florida. These are guys who have grown up around that word. Yes, there were a lot of people, that died for that word. There was a lot of just problems with that. It's a derogatory term, but the way it's used in mainstream nowadays and how flowing it is, now I'm not saying that it's acceptable. I use it amongst certain friends. There are friends that I won't use it amongst, but my dad, who happens to be African American, also says, don't ever use that word around me for the simple facts of historical reasons. I don't think how you can tell a guy who's been using this word to stop using it. And it's going to be pretty much your word versus my word. If I heard you say this 15 yards, you can't have a recorder on you. I think they should mind their own business. Chris Bosh says if they're going to ban that word, that they should ban all slurs. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's the thing. You can't just have that set aside and everything else be okay. If you're doing it all, you're doing it all. I absolutely agree with Chris on this. So I don't know. You kind of hit it really well. So
yeah, all right. An interesting person who did chime in their 2 cents was Riley Cooper, who was video recorded going viral with his use of the N-word at some country concert. Who cares, anyways? But I don't. Why does he care? What the heck? What's Riley Cooper had to do with this?
I think it's just a news angle right there. I mean, good on him for standing up for it. I just think it's another news angle.
Yeah, and that's slow time.
Yeah.
They're looking for anything. With that, we're going to talk a little bit about the combine here at the NFL. John's got some great notes for you guys. Boise State did have a couple of guys go. They had Matt Paradis joined by Charles Leno, as well as DeMarcus Lawrence, who I think we both can agree is probably our most reputable prospect coming into the draft. You got some numbers for us. How did they do in the combine?
Yeah, and so what we got to remember first with DeMarcus Lawrence is that he's a small-bodied linebacker, defensive end, and so already he's got that disadvantage going into it. But I got to say, I was a little bit not impressed, but just pretty complacent with what he did. He had 20 reps in the bench press, 4.8 seconds in the 40-yard, 34.5 vertical leap, 113 on the broad jump, 7.463 cone. Overall, pretty solid stuff. I see him more of an outside linebacker in a 34-3-4 scheme than anything. I don't see him on the line at all. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
He's kind of in a Dwight Freeney mold. Maybe not as athletic or explosive,
Exactly.
perhaps even as strong, but I think he's a guy who can come into the NFL, have a short career perhaps, maybe on special teams. They might develop his game. You never know. But I don't think he had a terrible showing, but I think he did the best he could with what he was working with headed into the combine.
But the disappointment that we talked about earlier on the show came from Matt Paradis and Charles Leno Jr. And we just thought so much better from these guys. And it's not to take away from their character or ability, but their performance at the combine was nothing short of poor. Let's start it off right at the top with the bench press. Paradis only 23, Leno Jr. 21.
No, the thing with Paradis, I'll cut him some slack. He's a walk-on from, I think he's from Council, and he's a 5-year guy here. Typical Boise State guy. They molded him. He doesn't expect to play in the NFL anyways. They were touting Charles Leno as the next Ryan Clady. Ryan Clady's arguably the best offensive tackle in football, if not top 3 to 5.
Couple All-Pros.
Yeah. So his numbers were poor, as you mentioned.
I mean, we're looking for linemen to at least hit late 20s, early 30s with the bench press. The record was Russell Bodine from North Carolina with 42. So he had twice as many as they did.
Yeah.
I just was not impressed with this. And again, they were very slow too. Paradis 5.34. Leno didn't even run. Vertical jump 29 and 26 respectively for the two. So just nothing great. So we can hope that their pro day improves.
No eye-popping stats, that is for sure. We got a little bit of time left. We're going to talk a little bit NBA action. Last week we talked a little bit about your net signing Jason Collins potentially to an NBA contract. It's a 10-day contract. I don't think this has anything to do with anything other than the fact that he's gay.
I disagree. I think they needed that body. They had the injury exception with Brook Lopez out for the season, so they had that extra roster spot. And Collins' play is just scrappy. He fouls, and that's what we need. Guys that are willing to just get down low and get aggressive. And, he puts in 5-10 minutes a game. He had a +8, I think, stat line. He had a couple rebounds, a steal, block, and then 2 fouls. So
my thing is, it's a 10-day contract. It wasn't a guarantee throughout the season contract. There's only 20 games left in the season. Never, if he was not homosexual, would ESPN running his 5-foul, 4.3 rebound stat line in 13 minutes of play if he was not homosexual. That's what my point is. I don't think it's a big deal. Is he serviceable? I understand you need bodies, things like that, but I don't think it's news.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it got the highlight for that reason, but I totally applaud the Nets for doing this. I believe that he's going to stay throughout the season. They need him because we don't have anyone down low.
Playoff run.
So,
there you go.
I mean, yeah, I do understand the attention's kind of worn off a bit, but for the signing itself, I think it was totally worth it, and it will, in some way, shape, or form, pay off.
We're going to stay in the East Coast for a little bit real quick before we wrap the show up. Raymond Felton has just been charged with carrying an unregistered firearm in New York, which is kind of a big deal.
It's kind of a big deal.
We saw this derail Plaxico Burress' All-Pro, maybe even Hall of Fame career at one point. The gun wasn't registered in his name. His wife showed up with it saying that he threatened her. Is this a problem for the NBA?
I think it's a huge problem. Gun problems in the NBA seem to at least, I don't want to say get touched on too much, but there's an association with them. And we question, or some people question why it's for instances like this, because that is just absurd. And it's not only a distraction for the Knicks, but it's a distraction for the entire association.
Absolutely.
It's not a good look at all, not a good PR look. Raymond Felton, what are you doing, man?
He's already on the trading block,
Yeah.
and he's out on $25,000 bail. Well, it's only $2,500. He's got that kind of money, but he's going to have to go to court for this. He's a famous person. They're going to speed this trial up. It's not going to be put off. Anytime you start dealing with the abuse of a woman or someone, or even the thought of it, that she even came to the police with that, there's going to be some investigation. And I think there's going to be a real problem here soon for the Knicks.
I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg for the Knicks. So.
I think you're right. Well, with that, that's all we have for the show today. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure working with you, John. We're going to be on sabbatical for a couple of weeks, but don't fret, Arbiter Sports Talk will live on, no more fishbowl. We'd like to thank University Television Productions and Student Media for making this possible, as well as our crew in the studio. For John Garrison, I'm Ty Hawkins. Thanks. We'll see you next time.